Layla Fidel, the Baghdad bureau chief for the McClatchy newspaper group. She's an American born in Saudi Arabia of a Lebanese father and a mother from Michigan. Is the surge working?
Well, I don't think anybody can disagree that violence did drop in the last 6 months of 2007, that it did go back to levels of about 2005, that you could feel a change, that the bodies left in the streets every day that are signs of sectarian assassinations did drop. But it's very reversible, and a part of it also can be explained in other ways. I mean, when you have a capital for Baghdad, it's divided by sect, and you've walled off certain neighborhoods to protect them. You know, the Sunni sort of ghettos of Baghdad now that are walled off completely, no cars go in, and they have these U.S.-backed militias, U.S.-sponsored militias that are protecting the neighborhood. So now they're being protected from the outside world, and the outside world is being protected from them.
And this week there were stories of more defectors in Sadr City. Are these people cowed? Are they afraid? What's happening?
I think it's a combination of things. I think there are people who don't feel that they should be fighting the Mahdi army, who don't feel that they should be killing their Shia brothers, because most of the Iraqi security forces are Shia. And I think there is also threats. I mean, we had reports of the Mahdi army going house to house in Sadr City, and if they were Iraqi security forces, they would say, we know where you live, we know where your family is, and if you fight us, we'll find you. And so I think it's a combination of the fear that their families will be killed and that they're being killed, as well as a moral objection by some of them.
Moral objection?
I think so, yes. To fighting the people they consider their brothers.
You broke the story that the Iranians actually intervened to stop the fighting in Basra,
That's
right?
Yeah, that's right.
So there's real evidence on the ground that Iran is influential in Iraq.
Yes, I mean, I don't think anybody questions that Iran is influential in Iraq. I don't know that all of Iran's influence in Iraq is bad influence. Iran has chips on every table. You know, they're betting on everybody. You'll talk to Iraqi officials who say that the Iranians are willing to give money to anybody. You have Sunni leaders going to meet with Iranian officials in Iran. Now, maybe it's a bad thing that the Iranians have so much influence, but what did they expect when they put a Shia government into power? These men took refuge and had funding in Iran, just in the practical sense. The American army is tired. They're on 3rd and 4th rotations in Iraq. Can they really go after Iran at this point? And secondly, what are we going to do if we go into Iran, the United States? I mean, first, they say that the Iranian government is bringing weapons into Iraq and funding and training Shia militias. I don't know if the Iranian government is doing that. I know that they say that the rockets hitting the green zone are 107mm rockets that are made in Iran. I know that they say the deadliest weapon used against U.S. troops are the EFPs, and those are deadly. But do you really go and invade the neighboring country of the unstable nation that you're already in? I think Iran has a vested interest in having a weak Iraq next to them, because they did have an 8 years war with Iraq. They did have a hostile environment between the two nations, and I think it's in their interest to have some control over that neighbor. And that's what they have. I mean, they have groups. The parties that are in power are the parties that were created in their area, are the parties that thrived and fought Saddam from Iran. And so when the best friend in the government of the United States, which I explained, the Islamic Supreme Council of Iraq, when Hakim is coming to the White House and speaking to President Bush, but also going to Iran and speaking to Ahmadinejad, and is very, very much influenced by Iran, it's really unclear what we're complaining about. I mean, we should have expected that this government would be Iran-friendly. The U.S. military says that they have people in detention that say they were trained and supplied in Iran, and apparently have killed U.S. soldiers. I don't know, that's what they say. I don't know that it's true. They have, and they also, you know, they're calling them these Iranian-backed special groups. The entire Iraqi government is Iranian-backed. You know, all these, they say that if the United States pulls out, Iran says, they can fill the security vacuum in Iraq. That's what Iran says. And Iran says, on their side of the story, they've never admitted to being involved in these things. publicly. And when you ask them about it, they say, well, actually, the problem is the United States. They want unrest in Iraq, so they'll never leave. I don't think Iran is the white knight or the evil villain either. I think that Iran is playing a political game in Iraq.
Is al-Qaeda still a factor?
Yes. I mean, I think the last 2 days showed that.
What do you mean?
The last 2 days, 120 people died.
You think that's from al-Qaeda?
Yes, I do.
Is al-Qaeda in Iraq indigenous to the country, or do you have evidence as a journalist that al-Qaeda gets its orders from Osama bin Laden and that network?
Well, you know, al-Qaeda was not a force to be reckoned with before 2003.
And we learned that.
It was not. Okay, yes, exactly. And so al-Qaeda was a very foreign idea. I think the rank and file al-Qaeda is Iraqi, but the leadership is foreign, and it's a foreign idea, and it's a foreign group, and I think it's easier for Iraqis to reject.
The question everyone's asking is, what will victory ultimately look like?
A lot of what's being done today is fixing years of mistakes that we've made. And so what is victory? Is victory dealing with a terrorist organization that didn't really exist in Iraq before we invaded? Is victory dealing with an Iranian influence on the government that we invaded to put in power? It's a very confusing thing. I asked the generals, they described something called irreversible momentum, a point where you get to where that's it. It's no longer reversible and fragile. It's real success. When that is, I don't know. What is an acceptable level of violence? They talk about acceptable level of violence. I don't know. And so to define victory, I don't even know what that is. Is victory that everybody's returning and there's electricity and water? Well, that's not happening. I mean, there's some people returning, yes, but you don't have 4 million people coming back home from internally and abroad. There's thousands of people.
4 million refugees.
4 million between...
Displaced within the country and outside the country.
4 million.
Are there any positive signs as a reporter, to a reporter?
You know, I have to say that the last 6 months of 2007, there were positive signs. You could move around a bit more. I've been able to move around a bit more, you know, and I can't deny that that's happening. The issue is you don't know what's lasting and what's real and what's going to backfire in 10 days. And, you know, this Basra situation, it was the symbol or the quantification of how quickly things can change.
What's the distinction between a Sunni and a Shia
Yes.
in the practical working world?
Practical world. Well, basically, it was a dispute on who was the leader of Islam following the Prophet Muhammad's death.
Hundreds of years ago.
Hundreds of years ago. Basically, the Shias believe that the proper, the rightful leader of Islam following Muhammad's death was his son-in-law and his cousin, Ali. And the Sunnis believed that the 4 caliphs that followed Muhammad were the rightful leaders of Islam. And the split came after Ali's death. And so the Shia and Sunni, I mean, this is just a religious disagreement, or I guess it's a bureaucratic disagreement from hundreds of years ago.
It's hard to believe that people still fight and die over this, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, there isn't, especially in Iraq, there isn't a huge difference. I mean, most of the tribes in Iraq are intermarried. It's not unheard of for Shias and Sunnis to be married and have children. And of course, the religious line in Islam comes from the father. So if the father is Sunni or Shia, then the children will likely be Sunni or Shia.
How old are you?
I'm 26.
And you've been in Iraq how long?
I became bureau chief at 25, and I started at 24. So I turned both 25 and 26 in Iraq.
So you have a lot in common with these soldiers and with the Iraqis whom you see. I mean, so many of them are young.
Yeah. I mean, I think covering this story, you have to be an empathetic person. You have to be able to put yourself in so many different people's shoes, and I try to do that with whoever I'm with at the time. So.
Your colleagues at the Bureau do a blog every day, right? They're allowed to write what they're seeing and thinking?
That's right. They do a blog. It's called Inside Iraq, and it's one of my favorite parts of what we do because it's so telling. It's things that we can't capture in a story, in an article that's going to go into a newspaper. It's life. It's the checkpoints that take them 3 hours to get to work in the morning. It's the curfews that stop their life. It's the fear of a sniper on campus when your daughter's at the dentist.